ASMR, who, and in this video we're going to be talking about Image of the Fendahl, which is the third story from season 15. This one is written by Chris Butcher. Is it pronounced Butcher? Boucher? Chris Boucher. It's directed by George Spenton Foster. Of course, stars Tom Baker as the Doctor and Louise Jameson as Leela. And yeah, I really enjoyed this story. I thought that it had that sort of gothic element of the previous Fourth Doctor stories in the Hinchcliffe and Holmes era. But I found it very engaging. I thought there was some really interesting, some little funny moments as well. I found the moment that really has stuck with me is, I believe, in part 2. There's a moment where the Doctor's been locked in a room, essentially, and he can't get out of the room. And then Leela is talking to a separate character about the Doctor and describes him as having a great gentleness. And then it cuts to the Doctor angrily kicking over a box. And I just thought that was very funny. But the story itself is these sort of scientists find this ancient skull and are sort of experimenting on it, and it awakens this kind of this alien menace, which is the Fendahl, of course. Some of the specifics are a little bit lost on me, but I thought it was quite good how the story kind of leads you into expecting who the antagonists are going to be. But then they're not really. There's a particular character who at the start very much seems like he's going to be the baddie, but actually he's not going to be the baddie. And he ends up helping the Doctor and Leela. I think this story is one of striking visuals. We all know the visual of I forget her name now. The actor Wanda Ventham, is it? Who is Benedict Cumberbatch's mum, if I'm not mistaken, who ends up getting sort of taken over and sacrificed almost and transformed into the sort of vessel for the Fendahl, where she's got the long flowing cloak and the golden skin and the painted on eyes, and that I thought was quite creepy because she just gets the thing possesses her almost and confuses her head. Then she gets just tied up and transformed against her will, and that's it. She's dead. She's gone. I'm trying to think. It's been a little while since I watched it. I will say, and it's just not had the chance to get round to recording a review for it. So I'm going a little bit off memory here. but I remember enjoying it. I thought the Fendahl monsters, the big snake things, I thought that they were decent, in the behind the scenes they talked about how originally they didn't have the sort of collar pieces and they just looked like big penises, so they tried to add this element to make it not look quite so much like that. But yeah, I enjoyed the story. I thought that Tom Baker was strong in it, and I thought Louise Jameson was good as well. Her hair is done in an interesting way in this story because she'd had it cut before filming, and it had been cut 6 inches too short or whatever, or they cut 6 inches off her hair, and it just didn't look right, so they had to tie it up in this weird style to sort of make do. It's not awful, but I don't think it necessarily suits her per se. But yeah, I thought the characters were decent. There were some fun regional accents here. There was some good moments from the Doctor. There's an interesting moment in part 4 where Tom Baker delivers a line to camera, looks at the camera and delivers his line. There was also, I did notice as well, I think it was part 1, it's set in this priory, sort of manor house, which of course is a set. But I noticed that they go into this, they have one room is where they're doing the sort of tests and stuff on this skull, and it was a lower angle shot looking up, but it was possibly a bit too low and possibly looking up a bit too much because you could see the top of the set wall and the studio lights in the ceiling only for a second. But I did notice that, which I thought was funny. It didn't necessarily take me out of the story, but I think when you compare it to Horror of Fang Rock, which had very small sets but shot them very well, that this had bigger sets but shot them arguably worse. Yeah, I'm trying to think if I have any other sort of specifics. I thought that the main sort of guy who ends up being an ally, who I think, and then ended up going on to be a big cast member of Blake's 7, one of the 7, which is a show I have not watched, but I would like to. I think I'd like to dig out Blake's 7 and give it a go. But I can't recall the actor's name. Let's see if I can find it. Edward Arthur, who plays a character called Adam Colby. I found his accent to be very 1970s RP, which means received pronunciation, but posh, essentially. He had a posh voice, but in a very 1970s sort of a way, I felt. And I kind of I could take him seriously a little bit, but I just thought that the accent was a bit silly for me. That may well have been his natural accent, and so I don't mean to be offensive or rude, but I just found it a bit like, that period of television of British television where, everyone had to be RP, which is why it was nice actually to hear some of the regional accents, which you do get a little bit in 70s Who, and 80s Who, but you don't really in the 60s. In the 60s, everyone is so RP to the point where Dodo has about 5 different accents. So it was nice to hear some more regional accents, yeah. But yeah, it was decent, as I say. It's been a bit of a while since I watched it, and it's just taken me a bit of time to get around to recording this review. And so some of the specific details of the plot are a little bit lost on me, and I know that it's a story that has that sort of reputation of like what is going on though, a little bit like Ghostlight, I think, to a lesser extent, but I sort of got more or less what it was going and what it was doing and where it was going, but yeah, those are my thoughts. No K9 in this one because he'd only just been added in. And of course, it's the final story from Chris Butcher, who had written 2 stories for the previous season. He'd written The Face of Evil and The Robots of Death. So a big Leela writer, although he didn't create Leela. Robert Holmes created Leela. But I thought it was a good Leela story. I think it's interesting watching this season because Leela's getting more, they're using her sort of specific character traits more than I had expected, like her instincts and her survival skills, and she can sort of sense things instinctively, and she's not affected by the swarm and the invisible enemy because she backs on instinct and stuff like that. And that continued into this story. And yeah, I enjoyed it. Is it my favourite of this season so far? I'm not sure. I don't know. I think it's a fairly consistent season up to this point, I would say. But yeah, I enjoyed it. So those are my thoughts. My brief sort of thoughts review on Image of the Fendahl. Have you seen this story? What did you think of it? Let me know in the comments. Like and share and subscribe, of course, if you haven't, and all those things. And yes, I will see you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you for listening. And I will see you next week for the next story, The Sun Makers. Thank you.